work very hard to make everybody in our enterprise as paranoid as possible.
Welcome to the CNL podcast, where we dive deep into the minds of IT and security professionals to uncover their experiences, challenges, and best practices in today's ever-evolving tech landscape. I'm your host, Cedric Show Up, Show Out Lusant, also known as your cyber expert. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Joe Orlando, Director of IT and Cybersecurity at Kern Health Systems. Thanks for joining us today, Joe. How are you doing?
Cedric, thank you for having me. I'm doing fantastic. Never had a bad day.
Hey, I hear you. I think the only bad day my father used to say the only bad day you'll have is the day you don't wake up. I was like, oh yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, every other day is a good day, right?
It's a good day. That's right.
Oh, so awesome. Can you tell us a little about your background and how you got started in the world of IT and security?
I have been around an awfully long time, as you can tell from the gray. I go all the way back to
Barely.
companies that nobody's heard of before, like Digital Equipment Corporation back in the 90s. But I actually started in security when I was with IBM. I was a
Ooh.
data warehouse specialist. And at that time, data warehousing was just the beginning of, databases and having data sets. And the only thing that we could do at that point in time was, well, you could protect the data any way you could. But over the years, security kind of grew because it was a matter of how critical the data was. And over time, I evolved into more and more security. So I went from IBM to Motorola and then joined PricewaterhouseCoopers as a European security consultant and just kind of continue to evolve ever since. And I've been a CISO at several smaller companies over time. And then here I am right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Was there a specific event or inspiration that actually pushed you towards this field? Anything like a mentor or just something you maybe saw on television or in person?
Regulation. The biggest push for me came over time with GDPR. I was in the UK when GDPR was being thought about back in 2000. And in
Hmm.
2000, I had a lot of clients who were saying, okay, we encrypt, but now we're going beyond encryption with having to be able to go in and find the data, determine who the data users are, who owns the data, what permission and consent do we have. So my skill set had to really blossom exponentially in order to be able to help my clients comply with the global privacy rules. And over time, all the different tools and capabilities grew to where we could actually monitor, manage, report, respond to cyber incidents. And that's really where it all started, and it grew from there.
Yeah, definitely. When you have all that context about the data you have, it does effectively allow you to be able to understand who should have access to this. And like you said, making sure you got the right permissions, making sure you got the right language on the opt-in forms, because otherwise you could be holding data that you're not actually legally allowed to. So that puts you into some other sticky waters when litigation comes around. So definitely can understand that. I deal with similar challenges myself. But while we're talking about challenges, were there any specific challenges that you faced when you were breaking into the field and climbing the ladder in this field? Because you've been at IBM, you've been at PwC, been around.
I think the biggest challenge was continuing education. I mean,
Hmm.
there is no way that, I have people who I talk to and they say, oh, you're a cybersecurity expert. And I have to chuckle. I have never met a cybersecurity expert because, in my view, there are things you'll never know. It changes on a daily basis. It's like the weather. And and more technology, more and more capabilities, bots, etc., have changed the game almost on a daily basis. So
Yeah.
just trying to stay on top of it, stay ahead of it, trying to anticipate it, that's probably the biggest challenge because what we worried about in year 2000 is nothing compared to what we have to worry about today with AI, today with all the other things that are going on. We didn't even consider some of these things 20 years ago. So just trying to stay on top of it and be able to be at least contemporary in your thinking is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, most definitely. I can understand that. And as you heard in the intro, I self-proclaimed but I do agree with that sentiment. You're never going to know everything. And that's what I tell a lot of my students. You build your expertise in specific domains. You can spend 1 year in one domain, I mean, one whole career in one domain of cybersecurity, and you still do, it's like a drop in the bucket compared to the grand scheme of things of what you actually know. Like you
Absolutely.
build core foundational competency in these other areas so that way you can be confident in conversations with the right stakeholders, but you really build your brand and your expertise in the core areas that you're working day in and day out of. But and the continuous education part of it is just something that I tell people, don't get into this field if you're not willing to continuously learn, because you will get burnt
Absolutely.
out. You will
Absolutely.
get burnt out. So it's better to, if you have that passion to learn, choose something that actually interests you and gives you life. So that way you don't just get, if you get into this field and you choose something that's not something that is bringing you life and is draining you, you will get burnt out quickly because it's continuous cycle wheel. It's a hamster on a mouse wheel, right? Because
Exactly.
just new things. But most definitely can understand that. So can you tell us a little bit about what your organization does at Kern Health Systems?
Kern Health System is an administrator of benefits for Medicaid and soon Medicare members in terms of everything you can think of. If you're a member, we look at arranging doctor's appointments, arranging travel to the doctor's appointments, arranging your referral systems, your tests, your lab tests. We maintain your medical records, hospital visits, exit hospitals, post-op work, all those things that have to do with the normal things that average people think about for claims processing. We do everything end to end with regard to making sure that we have services available to every member who's a part of our system.
Okay, okay. So what does the typical day look like for you in your current role? Because you're directing IT and cybersecurity, two different really domains. I like to call it IT trying to running the business, security you're trying to lock the business down,
Uh,
lock those doors so you have a business to come back to.
there's a balance because if I'm too strict with the cybersecurity side, I can actually slow down and impede operations. And
Mhm.
that's what you're trying not to do. So the other side of it is operational is we have regulations that say we have to process a claim in so many days. We have regulations that say we have to respond to a phone call from a member within minutes. So that's the call center. That's our operational systems. That's the data on every member. That's every time they want to reach us just to get a member card or get a new primary care provider. All those things have to be lights on all the time. So we're
Yep.
there as a fireman that says, okay, the systems are up and running optimally. We're also there to make sure that if there's a shortage or failure or something happens, we recover quickly. And we're also there strategically to look at how do I improve my services, make things faster, make things easier, reduce the amount of processes that have to take place manually, which is where human error injects itself. So operationally, it's streamlining that as much as it can. From a cyber side, it's a matter of making sure that every data element that we possess is as secure as it possibly can be without impeding the business itself. And that
Hmm.
includes internal, which is a big exposure in some places, as well as external people who are trying to maliciously get into our systems, either through phishing, squishing, spear phishing. We have to work on all of those things as well. So we actually have almost, it feels like one side of me that has an alarm bell that rings when it's a cybersecurity incident, and I have a different alarm bell that rings when I have a system that's down.
Yep, yep, and I can definitely resonate with that sentiment. And I'm sure you're facing a lot of different challenges, right? You got like you just said, you got threats, all different forms of phishing, vishing, smishing, whatever case. Then you have the technical exploits for 0 days in your potential external perimeter, third-party software, you name it, right? So there's a lot of threats that you're seeing right now. So my next question is, what's the biggest security threat that you're seeing right now in your industry, and how are you combating it? Because when I think about what you're doing, I'm thinking of like United Healthcare incident, what happened with all those folks when they got hit with ransomware. A lot of people couldn't get their benefits, right? And a lot of downstream effects happened with a lot of providers where they didn't know, hey, are we going to get paid, or should we actually perform these services? And that kind of held up, care for some people. Well, let me not say some people, millions of people,
That's right.
millions of people. So, well, what security threat are you seeing right now that's the biggest in your industry, and what are you doing to combat that on top of the things that you were just saying?
Social engineering is probably the biggest challenge we all have. And what I mean by that is it's people. There's only three aspects to cybersecurity: people, process, and technology. The
Hmm.
weakest area is people. We're just humans. And
Yep, we make mistakes.
yep. And the case in United Healthcare that you brought up was based on the fact that it was a system that was designed to help remote workers access. Well, that system failed to where that remote access allowed somebody to come in and actually access the system and plant the ransomware. So it was back to people again. Someone had made a mistake so that someone is able to compromise their credentials and get into the system. So for
Yep.
me, or for our enterprise, is we work very hard to make everybody in our enterprise as paranoid as possible. If you doubt it, don't play with it. So we get DocuSign documents that may come in that nobody recognizes, and they may put in their credentials. That could be a compromise problem. We have people who
Yep.
come in and there's a QR code that says, hey, we want to change your payroll and direct deposit. Click on this QR to make it easy. We have emails that come in that are spoofed that says, this is your IT department. I need you to help me upload something. So
Mm.
it really comes down to making sure that I've got paranoia amongst all the people, a sensitivity that says I can't go to Starbucks, I can't be on an airplane, I can't get on online on an open public Wi-Fi and do all the work I normally do without taking a risk to my systems. So it's really the awareness, the education, the sensitivity of people. Because technically, yes, I can build firewalls and yes, I can whitelist and blacklist, and there's a number of things I can do all along. What circumvents is all the technology and process tends most often to be people. And that's where the 80 to 85% of these breaches and security incidents happen or originate from people.
Yep, yep. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and I'm glad you brought up there on the tail end of that. There's a lot of other things that you can do. What I like to recommend to any organizations that I work with is always plan for people to fail. Right? You got to plan for them to fail and see and make sure you have the right technical controls and processes in place to mitigate any risk of if they do give out their credentials, or do we have visibility into any of those logs of how those credentials could potentially be used, right? Things along those lines. There's plenty of other things to do, but you're right. People, we make mistakes, right? We're humans, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And another case that I was just thinking of when you just said remote access system and social engineering, I was thinking of MGM and what happened over there in Las Vegas is just yet another case study where just the simple things the simple things could have potentially prevented that. I can't say 100% for sure, but one might think, yeah, just the basics, the hygiene, the fundamentals will save you a lot of trouble in the long run.
Absolutely. No, I have the biggest challenge I have, and I openly tell people I work with that I'm the troll under the bridge. I'm the one who steps on top of the bridge to see whether you can pass or not. The biggest challenge is a lot of folks, for convenience sake, and this is a challenge I think we all have, is I don't want to carry two phones, so I want to use my personal device. Or I don't want to use my company computer while I'm on holiday, I use my personal computer. All of those things that, if we allowed it to happen, provide access and attack vectors for anybody who wants to do anything malicious in my systems. So I'm the curmudgeon, openly, that tells them I don't want you using your personal device because if you're hacked, it eventually can lead to me being hacked. So
Yep.
I get pretty strict about some of these things.
And it's not like you're looking like the guy with tinfoil on the head. These are things that have happened
That's
time and
correct.
time again, and we have several different instances that have happened from similar cases. And the home network and personal devices are the hottest targets right now for attackers because with this new remote work environment, everyone is working from home. So those corporate devices that would typically be in the office are sitting on that home land now. So definitely can understand that. To kind of switch gears here, all these threats that we're facing, right? And all the new technologies coming out, the new advancements with machine learning and large language models and whatnot coming out now, and all being embedded into all different types of software in your supply chain, as well as just other tech in general. Like, how do you stay up to date with all the ever evolving changes within the landscape?
I literally have probably, if I were to count them out, I probably have 21 news feeds that I listen to, like Dark Web, or I read Dark Web. There's several others out there that will feed me constantly. And I'll look at whether there's a Microsoft Windows 11 update. I'll look at what CISA puts out, what NSA puts out.
Mhm.
I'll look at NIST. there's a number of publications that will at least, in many cases, they don't apply to me. In some cases, they do, but at least it lets me know that there's a potential vector that I have to be aware of. So that's one. The other one is there's a lot of organizations out there that do threat intelligence sharing. And that's another area where you spend some time to make sure, oh, I hadn't heard of phishing before. That was one that 5 years ago, nobody knew what a QR code phishing would look like.
Yep.
But you start to see things like that, and you go, oh, well, we ought to at least make the users aware that if you see a barcode, don't use it. So it's just a matter of trying to stay as abreast as possible with as many different sources as possible. And I rotate through them. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them get stale after a while. But I read, and then my cybersecurity team, unfortunately, gets emails from me at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning because I'm reading an article and I go, oh, well, I think they should know about this. And I forward it on and say, hey, here's something I just read about. So trying to keep good things as well. So that's the hardest thing, is trying to stay as broadly focused as you can in order to gather as much threat intelligence and situational awareness as you can.
Yeah, and that's very important. I myself, I probably have like 30 podcasts, but really I listen to really a core about 5 of them on a daily basis. The short news briefings like Cybersecurity Today, the Cyberwire, Click Here, just to name a few. Because they're at 404 Media. I like the way they report stories. Everyone has their different way they put a spin on things, as well as I'm in the ethical hacking side, so I'm dealing with a lot of IoT hacking, web applications, mobile applications, network stuff. So I'm always looking at new exploits, the specific vulnerabilities that are coming out. What's new that I could potentially take advantage of on an engagement or help uncover at clients that I service, to be able to help out if they may not even know that they're vulnerable to this certain type of vulnerability, or there's an indicator of compromise, and start checking those IOCs within their environment and may potentially find something and get in doing some threat hunting, right? But yeah, there's a lot of different areas where you can get that continuous feed of information from. And I think I hear this from a lot of cybersecurity professionals that say they just try to take in as much as they possibly can and share with the teammates. And I like doing that with my friends and close colleagues, because it helps out, because this is an ever evolving challenge anyway. You might not cross something that is actually pertinent and applicable to your situation at work, and someone else than our colleague who knows you sends you something that you share these things with. So that's always beneficial. But so as far as like building a security conscious team and culture, how do you approach doing that within your team? I know you said, try to be the coverage under the bridge, it's still the paranoia, but what else?
It's a lot of simplifying it. I mean, we try and make it so it's not technical. One of the things that I impress upon everyone is, in my industry especially, I have more data on any individual than any other resource out there, even financial banks. For example, I know your spouse's name, I know your spouse's employer, I know their phone number, I'll know your address, I know what pharmacy you use, I know about your children, I know your date of birth, social security numbers. If you think about it, I have more data than most any other industry that's out there. So that makes me a primary target. Most 89% of the breaches that have happened in 2024 were all in healthcare, not only because of United Health, but because people recognize that this is an area. For example, take a banking application. If I were to steal your identity, you might even notice that somebody went into your account and did something. I might have a member who died 3 months ago. Who's going to notice that social security number was sold to somebody else and they're using that social security number for medical benefits, for loans, or something else, because nobody's tracking the fact that that member has passed on? So I'm a prime target in my databases for information that can be used for a number of different areas. So if I can help people understand the magnitude of the data that we possess, the protection that happens under privacy, for example, the idea that a member can come in and say, I don't want you to have my data anymore, and have it removed. Or another classic one is you have a divorce situation where families have broken up. Well, that changes that. That information now can be scrubbed or changed or edited. But we are a critical and pivotal point for a collection of a lot of data. if I can help everybody in my enterprise and my third parties, all the channels that feed me, my supply chain, et cetera, understand the value and the necessity for encryption, for data protection, for data, the whole idea of categorization of PHI and PII, the whole idea of understanding where the data resides, how we transport it, how it's used, all of those things from a compliance standpoint as well, then I get them to get to a sensitivity where they say, oh, well, he's not just being, as you pointed out, the guy with the aluminum hat on. He actually has a legitimate reason for being
Yep.
as difficult as he is. And then I can give a great example. I had one in our organization not long ago where people had used their personal device. They used it to get into their HR system so they can go in and check their pay stubs and things like that. What happened was is because their personal device was hacked, somebody had gotten in, gone into the HR system, redirected their direct deposit to a bank in Montana. And then they didn't realize it until, weeks went by and there was no
I get
deposit in
paid.
their bank account. Well, when I can tell them real stories and I can give them real articles, I have a area within our organization called Cyber Tips, Cyber Bytes, excuse me, BYT. And Cyber Bytes is where I just put all these stories in place and I simplify them. They're not long articles. It's a matter of, like the one I just said about the idea of having your direct deposit redirected. Little stories like that that you continually put in front of people and they go, oh, I never thought about something like that. Or I never thought about having my Wi-Fi hijacked. Or I never thought about, so when I can keep that in front of folks and get people to really understand the sensitivity and the reason for it, then they become that paranoid person where even emails that I send out to mass distribution, I have a percentage of people in my organization who'll click the phishing button and say, sure, it's him.
Yeah, especially if you got any links in there or whatnot. They're getting it at 3, 4, or 5 in the morning, Joe. They're like, nope, I know Joe.
So I
But
usually send them a thank you note. If they click me as a phishing, I go, hey, you're paying attention. Love it. Thank you.
yup, if you feel some type of way, just hey, or you catch you by the water cooler, or give you a call of, hey, did you really actually send me this? Just as long as they're doing those, I would much rather them just, if they doubt, just click that link.
That's right.
Let me clarify, click the link to report it as phishing,
That's
not click
correct.
the link. I would have wanted to come back
That's
and
right.
slay me for that. But so, what's one piece of advice that you would give to other security leaders that are facing some of the same challenges within your industry?
We kind of covered it. I'd say the best thing is I call it DATE, and this is how I get my team focused. DATE is an acronym for Don't Avoid Training and Education. And it gets stale if you don't, and there'll be things that you don't understand, especially in incident response. It's especially in processes because you may not have had that in your process before to go back and look at IP addresses, to look at route tests, to look at net routes, et cetera. Always manage to look at another way to look at things, another way to manage that incident, another way to capture it, another way in order to say, oh, well, here's something that we're seeing repeated. We should let everybody know that this is something that we're seeing happen more often. So it's just don't avoid the idea of continuing your education and training.
Yeah, and that's where I see just unfortunately in my career, I have seen people who were let go because they did not keep up with their training and education,
Correct.
and it wasn't because of the organization wasn't supporting then the set in individuals to get the advancement or training and education. Is just say sometimes that again that initiative it wasn't there. And that's why I tell people again, don't come into this field if you're not willing to continuously learn, because not only will you get burnt out if you don't, but your skills will get stale. Things are constantly evolving. So like the skills that you might have sharpened years before may actually be dull now because there have been advancements in other areas where those skills really aren't as applicable from a day-to-day basis as they once were, or
Right.
maybe they still are, but there's the barrier, the bar is much higher now, and you got to fill that gap with the level of competency because there's always new attacks going on, always new things coming out, new technology, so potentially new protocols, new architecture, new things, new areas of concern you got to start doing due diligence on. But with that being said, what's one piece of advice would you give someone that's just starting out their journey into cybersecurity?
As you mentioned in the beginning, Cedric, there are paths or silos or columns within cybersecurity. I don't profess to be as good as the guys on my team. I could not do a trace route. I could not go back and look at spoofing and determine where that came from and go back to the original IP address. So there are areas that you can specialize in incident response. There's areas in the whole area of being able to look at it and determine and basically dissect it backward and determine forensically where the issue started from or where it could lead to. Looking at code and being able to develop software that doesn't have any kind of attack vectors in it. So there are a number of different areas. I happen to not have that technical depth that my team actually possesses. So I do it more at a strategic level, at a high level. I look at the bigger picture. But heaven forbid, if I have an IOC that comes in my way, I got to go look at one of my guys and say, okay, put this in English for me. But these guys are specialists. They can actually do those different things and run the trace routes, and they can do all of these things that will then identify forensically what I need to know. But there are so many areas. You got to find one that you're comfortable with, that you enjoy doing, that you want to keep learning and growing with. It's almost like wanting to look at it as a game, and I don't mean to diminish the importance, but to say, I want to be able to play against the guy who's trying to attack my system and beat him at his own game. How do I anticipate what they're going to do before he does it so that I can actually see it happening or predict that it can happen? And then when it does, I get thrilled going, aha, I caught him. I already knew he was going to try that. That's a special kind of area where you sit back saying, okay, and if that could be in software development, where I sit back and I talk to my developers and I go through with an intent to say, I'm going to find a way to break into what you wrote. And I'm going to find a backdoor. I'm going to find an area where I can do an SQL transfer. I can play with the website. That's all part of the fun of saying, okay, let me see how I can actually break into it and then learn from that and go back and say, you need to close this. You need to change this, especially in all the things that are in the cloud now with the segmented databases, et cetera, leakage between databases. All those things are a specialty that if you enjoy doing it, then you can focus on that because it's not going to get old. It's not going to go obsolete. It's a matter that's going to keep going, especially with AI. And just find an area that you want to spend the most time in. And these guys are going into my position over time because they become very good at what they do and they go into security management, supervisory roles and incident response and writing playbooks and policies. And then they eventually get up to my level where it's strategy and it's looking at new technology implementation and emerging technologies. So there is an evolution. You're never going to be stuck, but just find one area where you can start and say, I enjoy doing this and get proficient at it and then grow from there.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that, and that's been kind of the story of my career. I started off doing web hacking. I was like, let's want to get into mobile. I started doing mobile hacking. Oh, I'm good at this. Okay, let's go do some hacking now with the firm that I ended up getting on board with and serving their clients ever since. And it's been great to just keep jumping from domain to domain, just
Right.
working from the cloud space, working from the secure system and design and development, digital forensics. You said incident response, threat hunting, working insider threat engagements. Trying to see exactly what the attackers did once they got in. This it's you never know. It's just,
That's
well,
right.
I'm very blessed to work in an industry, work specifically in consulting, where I'm dealing with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different industries. So it allows me to get exposed to a depth of knowledge it's on an institutional level with all of these organizations within their industry to see the different challenges, and I get to take what's good in one area and find where it's applicable in another area and give guidance. And so it's definitely not for the faint heart, but definitely when you pick something that you truly enjoy. I do try to treat it like a game, so that don't feel bad about the way you put it, because whenever I get on an engagement, I treat it as my one objective is to be just like the criminal. Like, I want to get to, what can I abuse this web application for? What data does it hold in the back end? Is it going to give me access to payment data? Is it going to give me access to, like you said, medical data that I could potentially use, or any personalized data that I could potentially use in any downstream scheme for social engineering as the attacker? Because at the end of the day, the information is the goal. That's
That's
what
right.
we're all protecting, right? It's information technology at the end of the day. And for me, I like to treat it like, I mean, when I do it, it takes the pressure off a little bit so I don't feel so filled with anxiety when I want to engage. Like I have to hack them, so I treat it like a CTF game type of. When I do find something, I don't find something every single time, but when you do find something, it feels great, and it's what keeps you going and keeps me wanting to learn more and keeps me wanting to expand my skill set, so that way I can continue to help clients out in these different areas.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great.
But what do you think, Joe, is the most important skills for professionals to develop in this space? Right? Like we get it. There's a lot of different domains. You got identity and access management, you got government risk and compliance, you got engineering, your ethical hacking, all that good stuff, right? But overall, what do you think are the most important skills that a professional within the cybersecurity space needs to develop?
I think it really comes down to, I know I mentioned the fact that you want to specialize in the beginning. Growing that from a myopic point of view to a broader picture so that we actually look at cradle to grave. So we have obviously the domains of the network, we have mobile, we have software, we have telecommunications, we have users. The idea is that to take each one of these and augment it as much as possible to where you get to a point like where I'm at, whereas I look across all of it and I have to worry about every element of those attack vectors and try and balance that to say, okay, we've understood it. And my biggest challenge these days is still software. Software is where most of these injections for ransomware come from. Most of these problems that we occur where they basically can I'm sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms, but denial of service comes
Mm-hmm.
from. That nowadays, for example, AI can create a DDoS with just clicking a button because AI does it all, and they can overwhelm the servers and shut you down. So
Yeah.
in ultimately, it's growing that myopia to where don't try and do it all at one time. I mean, I'm at this now 35 years. Over time, growing that myopia to where you start to encroach upon more and more areas to where you can get a broader picture of the landscape and say, okay, let me look at everything and all my attack vectors, whether it's software, whether it's network, whether it's people, etc. And then work on the whole idea around how do I build and prepare myself? What are my processes? What are my logging capabilities? What are my reporting capabilities? What are my response training? I mean, the cyber guy is not the only person that when there's an incident that has to be involved. So I got to
Yep.
get system administrators to understand what happens when it has to happen. What do we shut down? How do we change and shut off the AD passwords? All these things have to occur. And it's not just the cybersecurity guy that does it. It includes the network administrators. It includes a number of people. The help desk even has to know what goes on. I've got an incident. What do you do to let people know that this happened? So it's building that team and letting every team member know what their role is, training them on what that's supposed to happen. Because in an incident, just like in a disaster, you don't want people to stop and think, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Big
Yep.
mistake.
Because if you
They
don't
ought
can't
to
even
know.
communicate, you can't even communicate because everyone's gonna be walking around with their heads cut off, like in
Exactly.
panic.
Exactly. So you want it to be so crisp that if I tell you, and I'm oversimplifying, incident 13, 13 means, oh, well, let me pull that up. That means this happened, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this. I don't have to think and wonder what I'm supposed to be doing. I know exactly if it's in incident 13, I'll just pick DDoS. If I have a DDoS incident, what do I have to do in order to recover from it? Who does what? Who do I contact? What are they supposed to do? How soon can I recover? What do those things have to look like? Who do I report it to? I should have that all spelled out in a playbook so that I don't leave it to the individuals to say, what am I supposed to do now? And who am I supposed to call? And who am I supposed to talk to? So
Yep.
ultimately, it's being able to build that and look across and say, all right, everybody has a role, make sure everybody understands their role, what they're supposed to do, and being able to orchestrate, almost like the coach on a football field, the plays that have to be played. And that's ultimately where it goes to. But growing that from your myopic view, whether you're a network administrator in cybersecurity, all the way up to looking at incident response and reporting and forensics, et cetera, to a point where you have playbooks that you've defined, policies that you've provided that help everybody understand exactly the parameters of how we operate and what happens in the case of an incident. That's nirvana. And I don't know of anybody who's absolutely there yet. I can give you one good example. I don't know many enterprises, and I came from consulting before where I am now, I don't know many enterprises now who are prepared if you were to call up and say, gee, I'd like to have all the data you have on me, because we don't classify data to the point where I can go and look at every server out there and figure out where your data is. B, if you come in and say, well, I'd like to edit that data, those processes in many enterprises don't exist. C, I want to delete it all. And I want you to verify and validate it was all deleted. I don't know many enterprises, and I'm talking in AmeriExpress as a client on down, that have that capability today to, because you think about it, if I'm across 9 databases, that means I have to have system admin privilege to 9 different databases. Who am I going to give that much access to in my enterprise that can hit all 9 databases? I've created a honeypot. If I can get Sam's credentials, I can go all over the place. So nobody gives that to one person. So the challenge is we still have areas where we can't meet with the compliance requirements because of the complexity of our systems. So it takes time to get to that point.
Yeah, and I can to that example specifically, I can tell you that there are companies that are giving individuals that much access, because I have been in engagements where we've popped the DBA and they've had access to all different types of goodies on-prem, in the cloud, you name it. But yeah, most definitely it is that problem in itself, like being able to understand what data you have, where it's stored, where all of it's at. A lot of organizations are facing those challenges, and they're having to start thinking about doing the due diligence now retroactively because of legislation like CCPA and GDPR, and which is forcing them to actually, hey, what do we actually have on this person? Because are we in violation of these laws?
Amen. Amen.
And
Yes.
you can't even answer the questions, then you know the answer.
That's right.
You know the answer already. Now from there, you just got to work to get better. And I think that's probably some of the main initiatives that CCPA and GDPR were trying to spearhead and get these companies to start taking a look at more seriously, instead of just trying to collect any and everything on us without even having permission, without letting the user know or any rights to it, because it was getting pretty wild. And I feel like here in America, we still have these bespoke frameworks in different states, but we don't really have anything yet on a federal level like GDPR, which I think we're lacking behind. Which
Correct.
hopefully in the near term that we can get something passed to protect us at a
I
federal
agree.
level.
I agree.
So the states don't have to figure it out on themselves, and companies don't have to figure out they have to comply with this state, that state, this state. Like it's a lot already.
Yes. Well, at least in healthcare, for example, just in the last 2 days, HIPAA's come out more strongly than they ever have in the past about encryption
Yeah.
requirements. So HIPAA is at least national, and HIPAA is at least now becoming more stringent with regard to how to do the data protection. And so many folks have balked at the idea of the expense, the complexity, the operational impact of encrypting, but anonymization is clearly the thing that has to happen. And it is the only way that I know that you can actually protect yourself from that data leak or that sort of thing. You can't prevent DDoS and you can't prevent ransomware with encryption, but at least the fact that somebody could take it is precluded because you've managed to make it so it's unusable to them. And that's still a challenge across the industry to the level of degree of encryption. I've had clients who, well, I'll only encrypt what I think is important. I'll just do social security numbers and an address. Well, there's 23 elements under HIPAA that require that these things be encrypted. Not everybody is going to that level of detail, and that's something that eventually will evolve to where everybody, and these new regulations come out in the last couple of days, plus what's coming out of the Capitol right now. Biden also bid on it as well, cybersecurity requirements. Those are all things that will strengthen everybody's who's holding data, whether it's healthcare or finance or whoever else.
Yeah, most definitely. I think brain fart. Well, I'm gonna edit that. That one will probably get edited out. Thanks, editing team. You take care of me. Take care of me on that one. But most definitely, kind of switch gears here because I want to be cognizant of your time. When you're not fighting cyber threats, what do you enjoy doing for fun?
I've got to be honest with you. I'm a prolific reader. So, and I read for things that I can use. I'm not a nonfiction reader. I'm not someone who reads for enjoyment. It's a matter of collecting data points that I can store and go, I'm reading it to retain it, comprehend it, because at some point I'm going to need to have it. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm a very boring reader because I'll read technical, I'll read medical. I mean, I'm now in the midst of looking at, I know this is very boring, the whole sterilization process within healthcare and understanding the process from beginning to end and how that's all tracked, because that's another area where $4.5 billion is spent a year on infections in hospitals. Now,
Yep.
that has
Yep.
nothing to do with cybersecurity, but there are software tools that could be another entry point into the bigger software tools. So I
Hmm.
just look at data points that my grandchildren all laugh at me because I have fun facts. So I pick up useless fun facts that no one ever has to need to know for my reading, and I'll state them out and they go, well, that's nice to know. Thanks, Pop. I appreciate you saying that. But I'll read stuff like that just so that I have more data points to work from.
Hey, I hear you. I don't really like reading, stuff that's not actually going to be useful pretty much either. I like to read things that are going to teach me things, something I can put into the treasure chest and just help develop myself as a professional. So I've expanded what I'm currently reading right now. I'm reading the Secrets trilogy from Russell Brunson, which is amazing. I'm on the last book in the series. I actually started out of the series, but this whole series is all of his frameworks on how he's grown homegrown a sales and marketing platform into over $100 million in revenue within a year. I believe it was a year or 2 years, I forgot, and with no outside investor money, no VC money. And
Wow.
that that that's you can't get any better than that of an American dream story, right? And he talks about his trials and tribulations from starting previous companies, having to lay off hundreds of employees, and making a comeback, with this new his new platform, and exactly how he did it and all the frameworks that he used. And I was like, this is basically how any business should be functioning. Like, this is like the core area. So he helps businesses all over the world with all the different areas with running their business and operations. And
Fantastic.
I'm reading that right now, and it's amazing. It's I'm actually taking some of that stuff and applying it to some of my own little endeavors on the side.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll have to look into
Um,
that one.
but yeah, definitely check him out. I even resonated more with Russell after I read he was a wrestler. I'm like, I grew up wrestling too, and he was a state champion. I know already how much hard work he had to do, and he likes to weave in stories about how he used to train with his dad and
Wow.
whatnot. And definitely, it goes great with all the information that he gives you. Great analogies to drive the concepts home. But anything you're reading? You said you were reading the sterilization right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't
Uh,
realize, and here's a couple of fun facts for you. I didn't realize as I go through it all the steps that have to happen, all the degree, all the different methods, whether it's steam or chemical. I didn't realize all the different processes in terms of it goes through so many steps with the fact that it has to be decontaminated before it can be sterilized, because sterilization, even steam, won't go through any particles that are left on a device, surgical device. So it has to be thoroughly cleaned. Even if it's wet, you can't sterilize it because the water provides a barrier from sterilization. So these are fun facts that my kids just roll their eyes about. But it's you sit there and look at it, and I'm looking at the software that actually runs it, because those software tools tie into the bigger software tools that tie into other software tools, like back to the medical record, because I know what devices were used in a hip replacement. And if there was an eventual infection that led to an amputation, it can go back to the sterilization process in order to see where it might have fallen apart. So yes,
mhm.
it's inane information, but it's just a little bit more information than I ever had before. So it's an education.
Yeah, most definitely. I didn't have a how I didn't have those level of details, but now I think about it. When you just said software, you say software to me, I'm thinking attack vector already. So, what type of software? What we running executables is a web application, thick application, whatever the case may be. It starts to perk
Yep.
the ears up. But all right, well, Joe, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for sharing your incredible insights and experience with us today. For our listeners, if they wanted to connect with you, where could they find you online?
I have a LinkedIn profile,
Mhm.
just Joe Orlando in LinkedIn, and that's the best place to find me. And I take things and from my research and I post on there. Like the most recent one was board presentations to on cybersecurity, things that boards need to understand and know. It's kind of a way to
Mhm.
help pitch the board as to why investments are important. My
Yep.
most recent PPT I put up on my site was how to develop secure SaaS software as more and more
Mhm.
stuff goes into the cloud or relying on the cloud in order to run it. So that's really where I tend to spend most of my time if I'm posting anything.
Okay, definitely for our listeners, definitely check out Joe on LinkedIn at Joe Orlando, and I'll check out that board presentation because I frequently find myself in board presentations trying to translate the technical risk into layman's terms that they understand on behalf of their directors, so they don't have to do it. So
Amen.
they have that outside party that gets to come in and kind of, hey, this is an unobjective point of view coming in and trying to let us know what we're doing and where should we invest in. And that's very important, I think, for any cybersecurity professional and leader at that to understand how to do, to be able to give those effective presentations to the board to get that buy-in. Because without that buy-in, it's
That's
really
right.
all just a paper exercise from there, everything you're doing. And it can make your job a lot harder if you don't have that buy-in to get the right, tools or right resources in general to accomplish the workload and tasks that you have at hand. But
Absolutely.
thanks, Joe, again for coming on. For our listeners, if you're brand new, please don't forget to subscribe to the CNL podcast for more conversations with IT and security leaders like Joe. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure.
Thank you for having me.